am 32 years old, and for most of my life, love felt like something meant for other women. The kind who walked into a room and made people turn their heads without trying. The kind who were always chosen. I was never invisible, but I was never the first option either. I was the girl men dated when they were lonely, confused, or unsure of what they wanted. I was the pause between real loves, the lesson, never the destination. For years, I told myself I was fine with that. I built a life that looked complete from the outside. A steady job, a small but cozy apartment with plants I kept alive out of stubbornness more than skill, friends who cared about me, weekend routines, morning coffee rituals, evening walks with music in my ears. I smiled often. I laughed easily. I was good at pretending that my heart didn't ache when I came home to silence. At night, though, when the lights were off and the city noise faded into a distant hum, the questions always came. Why hasn't it happened for me yet? What am I doing wrong? Am I too much? Or not enough? I watched my friends fall in love, get engaged, get married, have children. I stood beside them at weddings, holding bouquets, smiling for photos, clapping when the music played. I meant every smile. I was genuinely happy for them. But there was always a quiet sadness sitting behind my ribs, whispering that maybe my turn would never come. I dated. Of course I did. I went on countless first dates that never became second ones, conversations that felt forced. Men who talked only about themselves. Men who wanted something casual and made it clear that commitment wasn't on the table. Men who said, "You're amazing, but..." I became tired of the "but." By the time I met Daniel, I had stopped believing in big love stories. I wasn't dreaming about soulmates anymore. I just wanted something real, something calm. Someone who would choose me without hesitation. Daniel appeared in my life when my guard was already half lowered. We met through mutual friends at a small gathering. Nothing dramatic, no instant spark that movies love to exaggerate. But he listened when I spoke. He asked questions. He remembered details. When he smiled at me, it felt warm, intentional, like he actually saw me. That alone felt rare. He was charming in a quiet way, not loud, not arrogant. He had a job he liked, an apartment that looked lived in, a sense of humor that caught me off guard. When he asked for my number, I didn't overthink it. I gave it to him without fear or expectation. Our first dates were easy. Coffee turned into long walks. Walks turned into dinners. Dinners turned into late-night conversations in my car because neither of us wanted to say goodbye. He told me about his past relationships, not in a bitter way, but with a calm honesty that made him seem emotionally mature. He said he wanted something meaningful now, something lasting. I wanted to believe him. Slowly, carefully, I let myself hope. I told myself not to rush, not to imagine the future too soon. But hope has a way of slipping through cracks you don't even realize are there. I caught myself smiling at my phone when his name appeared. I caught myself wondering what it would be like to wake up next to him. I caught myself feeling safe. That was the most dangerous part. After a few months, he became part of my routine. Mornings started with his messages. Evenings ended with his voice. Weekends were no longer empty. He stayed over. He left his toothbrush at my place. He joked about how it already felt like home. I noticed the small things first. How he sometimes avoided answering his phone when we were together. How he turned the screen face down without thinking. How certain topics made him uncomfortable. I noticed, but I ignored them. I told myself I was being paranoid, that not every man was hiding something. After all, I didn't want to lose him. When you've waited as long as I had, you learn to silence your instincts if they threaten what little happiness you've found. The first lie I discovered was small, insignificant, really. At least that's what I told myself. A story he told me didn't match something I later heard from someone else. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off, said he had mixed things up, said I was overthinking, and I believed him, because I wanted to. The second lie was bigger. A woman messaged me on social media one evening. I remember staring at my phone, my heart pounding as I read her words. She asked how long I had been with Daniel, said she thought he was her boyfriend. I confronted him immediately. He didn't deny knowing her. He said it was complicated, that they were basically over, that she was emotional, that he hadn't known how to tell me yet. He apologized. He looked remorseful. He promised to cut things off completely. He cried. I had never seen him cry before. It disarmed me. It made me feel powerful and compassionate at the same time. I told myself people make mistakes. I told myself that love means forgiveness. So I stayed. Looking back now, I understand how dangerous that decision was, but at the time, all I could see was the fear of starting over, the fear of being alone again, the fear that maybe this was the best I would ever get. The truth revealed itself slowly, like a wound that refuses to heal. I began to realize that Daniel didn't love me, not in the way I loved him. He loved what I gave him, my attention, my emotional support, my stability. I listened to his problems, I encouraged his ambitions, I adjusted my life around his schedule. I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger, and he took it all without hesitation. He borrowed money and promised to pay it back. He used my apartment as a place to rest when his life felt overwhelming. He leaned on me emotionally while giving very little in return. Whenever I needed reassurance, he suddenly became distant. Whenever I asked for clarity, he accused me of pressuring him. "You're asking too much," he said once, his voice tired, almost annoyed. "Just need some space." Space. That word became his favorite weapon. The breaking point didn't come with screaming or dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, cruelly, on an ordinary evening. I found out, accidentally, that he had never stopped seeing other women, that I wasn't special. I was convenient. When I confronted him this time, he didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He looked at me with a cold honesty that shattered something inside my chest. "I never promised you forever," he said. "You wanted more than I could give." In that moment, I felt stupid, used, ashamed. All those nights I defended him, all those times I ignored my instincts, all those pieces of myself I had handed over so easily, they came crashing down on me at once. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I simply felt empty. After he left, my apartment felt unfamiliar, too quiet, too large. I sat on the floor and cried until my body ached, not just because of him, but because of what his betrayal confirmed, my deepest fear, that I was unlovable. That night, I made a promise to myself, though I didn't yet know how to keep it. I promised that I would never again allow someone to make me feel this small. At 32, broken and exhausted, I had no idea that this ending was only the beginning. After Daniel left, time stopped behaving normally. Days passed, but they didn't move forward. They circled around the same thoughts, the same memories, the same quiet humiliation. I went to work, answered emails, smiled at colleagues, nodded during meetings, all on autopilot. Inside, I felt like someone had hollowed me out and forgotten to put anything back. Evenings were the worst. I would come home, drop my bag near the door, and stand there for a moment, listening. Silence had never sounded so loud. I cooked out of habit, but rarely ate. food tasted like nothing. Sleep came in fragments, short, restless, filled with dreams where I was always asking questions and never getting answers. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he choose to lie instead of leave? Why did I stay when everything inside me was screaming to run? I replayed every moment of our relationship, searching for the exact point where I lost myself. The truth was uncomfortable. I hadn't lost myself all at once. I had given myself away in pieces, slowly, willingly, believing that love required sacrifice. I stopped answering messages from friends for a while, not because they didn't care, they did, but because I didn't know how to explain the kind of pain that comes with realizing you helped someone hurt you. How do you admit that you ignored red flags because you were afraid of being alone? One evening, as I sat on my couch staring at the wall, I finally allowed myself to say it out loud. He used me. The words felt heavy, but also strangely grounding. Naming the truth gave it shape. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal, manipulation, emotional theft, and it had changed me. I began to notice how distrust had quietly settled into my body. My shoulders were always tense. My phone made me anxious. Every message felt like it might carry bad news. I flinched at kindness, suspicious of its cost. I tried dating again too soon, not because I was ready, but because I wanted to prove something to myself, to the world, maybe even to Daniel, though he was no longer in my life. The first man I met after him was kind enough, but I felt nothing. The second was charming, but my walls were already up. The third tried to get close too quickly, and I pulled away so hard I surprised myself. I realized I didn't know how to be open anymore. Love, once something I longed for, now felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff after falling once. Even the idea of stepping forward made my heart race. So I stopped trying. Instead, I turned inward. Not in a dramatic, inspirational way, but in a quiet, lonely one. I spent more time alone than ever before. I walked aimlessly through the city. I listened to music that hurt in the right places. I cried in public bathrooms and wiped my face before anyone noticed. I started writing again. I hadn't written since my early 20s, when emotions flowed freely and hope still felt limitless. Now my words were darker, heavier. I wrote letters I would never send, pages filled with anger, grief, shame, and questions with no answers. But slowly, something shifted. In writing, I noticed patterns, how often I blamed myself for other people's actions, how deeply I believed that love had to be earned through patience and understanding, how afraid I was of being too difficult, too emotional, too much. I wasn't too much. I had simply been giving too much to the wrong people. That realization didn't heal me instantly, but it planted a seed. One afternoon, months after the breakup, I sat in a small cafe near my apartment, my laptop open but untouched. Rain tapped against the window. The world outside moved slowly, blurred by water and gray light. I felt calm for a long while. Not happy, not hopeful, just calm. That's when I noticed him. He was sitting a few tables away, reading a book, not scrolling on his phone, not watching the room, just reading, completely absorbed. Something about that quiet focus drew my attention. He looked ordinary in the best way. No performative confidence, no need to be seen. I didn't think much of it at first. People come and go, moments pass. But when he stood up to leave, our eyes met briefly. He smiled, not the practiced kind, not the charming kind, just a small, genuine smile. And for reasons I couldn't explain, my chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. I didn't talk to him. I didn't even expect to see him again. Life isn't a movie, and I learned not to assign meaning too quickly. Still, I thought about him later that night, about the way his presence hadn't demanded anything from me, about how I hadn't felt the need to impress him or protect myself or analyze every detail. That alone felt new. A week later, I saw him again. Same cafe, same corner table. This time, he noticed me first. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "I hope this isn't strange," he said, his voice calm, steady. "But I've seen you here a few times. Would you like to join me?" There was no pressure in his tone, no expectation. I surprised myself by saying yes. His name was Michael. We talked about simple things at first: books, work, the city. He didn't overshare, he didn't flirt aggressively, he didn't try to steer the conversation anywhere it didn't naturally go. When silence appeared between us, it didn't feel awkward, it felt comfortable. That terrified me, because comfort meant safety, and safety meant vulnerability. When we said goodbye, he didn't ask for my number immediately. He simply said he hoped we'd talk again. I walked home with my heart pounding, not because I was falling in love, but because something inside me was waking up, cautiously, nervously, after a long sleep. I didn't know it yet, but Michael would challenge everything I believed about love. And before that, he would force me to confront myself. I told myself not to expect anything from Michael. That became my silent rule. I didn't want to project hope onto a stranger again, didn't want to build castles in my mind only to watch them collapse. I promised myself I would stay present, cautious, grounded. Of course, promises are easier to make than to keep. We began running into each other regularly, though later I admitted to myself that it wasn't entirely accidental. I adjusted my schedule slightly, chose the cafe at certain hours, pretended I hadn't noticed when he did the same. Our conversations grew longer, deeper, without either of us forcing them. We talked about work frustrations, favorite childhood memories, books that had changed us. He spoke thoughtfully, listening as much as he talked. When he disagreed, he did so gently, without trying to dominate the conversation. That alone felt unfamiliar. With Daniel, I had always felt the need to explain myself, justify my feelings, soften my words. With Michael, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel evaluated. Still, I kept my distance emotionally. When he asked about my past relationships, I gave vague answers. I wasn't ready to say his name out loud. I wasn't ready to admit how deeply I had been hurt. Vulnerability still felt like standing naked in front of someone who might turn away. Michael didn't push. He respected my boundaries in a way that both relieved and unsettled me. Part of me was used to love being loud, demanding, slightly chaotic. This calm presence felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. One evening, after weeks of talking, he invited me to dinner, a real date, clear, intentional, simple. I almost said no, not because I didn't want to go, but because fear whispered that this was the moment everything could go wrong, that getting closer meant risking pain again, that I should protect myself while I still could. But something inside me, a quieter, braver voice, said yes. Dinner was easy, too easy. We laughed, we shared food, we talked about dreams we hadn't fully given up on. When he looked at me, his gaze didn't slide away or search the room. He stayed present, focused, like there was nowhere else he needed to be. Halfway through the evening, I realized I hadn't once felt the need to perform. I didn't exaggerate stories. I didn't hide my seriousness behind humor. I didn't shrink my opinions to be more agreeable. I was simply myself, and he seemed to like that version of me. That scared me more than rejection ever had. As the weeks passed, our connection deepened naturally. He walked me home after dinners. We sat on park benches late into the night. He learned the rhythm of my moods, the way I needed quiet after long days, the way I talked with my hands when I got excited. Still, there were moments when the past rushed back in. When he didn't reply to a message immediately, my chest tightened. When plans changed unexpectedly, my mind spiraled. I hated that part of myself, the anxious, fearful woman shaped by someone else's betrayal. One night, after a long pause in our conversation, I finally said it. "I've been hurt before," I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He waited. I told him about Daniel, about the lies, about feeling used, about how I had lost trust, not just in men, but in my own judgment. When I finished, I felt exposed, raw, ashamed of how much power that story still had over me. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "That wasn't your failure," he said softly. "That was his." No one had ever said that to me before. I had blamed myself for months, for staying, for believing, for loving. Hearing someone else separate my worth from someone else's betrayal felt like a knot loosening inside my chest. Michael continued, "I'm not him, and I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I won't punish you for protecting yourself." Tears blurred my vision. Not dramatic sobs, just silent tears sliding down my cheeks as relief washed over me. That night, when he kissed me for the first time, it was gentle, unrushed. He pulled away first, searching for my consent, for comfort. I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. Still, healing isn't linear. There were days when I pushed him away emotionally, days when I questioned his intentions, days when I expected him to disappoint me, simply because that's what I had learned to anticipate. But Michael remained consistent. He showed up when he said he would. He communicated openly. He didn't disappear when things got uncomfortable. He didn't make me feel guilty for needing reassurance. Slowly, painfully, my nervous system began to relax. I noticed changes in myself beyond our relationship. I laughed more, slept better, took care of my body with more kindness. I stopped apologizing for my feelings. I spoke up when something bothered me instead of swallowing it. Love wasn't just something happening to me, it was changing me. One evening, as we lay on my couch, his arm around me, I realized something profound. I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing myself again. And that awareness, that line I refused to cross, became my strength. I didn't need Michael to save me, but with him, I was learning that love didn't have to hurt to be real. Real love doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, in moments you almost miss. I realized this one morning when I woke up before Michael and watched him sleep. His breathing was steady, unguarded. There was no performance, even in rest, no tension in his face, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the urge to analyze what this moment meant or how long it might last. I simply felt present. That presence scared me, because peace, I had learned, could be taken away. As our relationship deepened, something unexpected happened. The closer I felt to him, the louder my old fears became. Trauma has a way of resurfacing when you finally feel safe enough to face it. I began to notice how easily my body reacted to uncertainty. A delayed reply, a distracted tone, a change in routine. Each one sent my thoughts spiraling, whispering old lies. He will leave. You will be replaced. Don't get too comfortable. And instead of talking about it, I withdrew. I became quieter, more careful with my words. I tried to control the narrative, to predict his needs before he expressed them, to make myself easier to love. The familiar pattern returned, subtle but dangerous. Michael noticed. One evening, after I had canceled plans for the third time in a row, he asked gently, "Are you pulling away from me?" I wanted to deny it, to protect myself with deflection, but something inside me was tired of running. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of me?" he asked. "No," I said, "of losing myself again." The words surprised both of us. I told him how I was afraid of repeating the same cycle, of overgiving, overcompromising, slowly disappearing inside a relationship. I told him part of me didn't trust happiness because it had never stayed before. He listened quietly. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I don't want you to lose yourself for me," he said. "I want to know who you are when you choose yourself." That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Choosing myself. I realized how rarely I had done that in relationships, how often I had equated love with endurance, how deeply I had believed that staying, no matter the cost, was proof of commitment. I began to change, consciously this time. I started saying no without guilt. I expressed discomfort when something didn't feel right. I didn't immediately apologize for needing space. I spent time alone without feeling like I was sabotaging my relationship. And something remarkable happened. Michael didn't pull away. He leaned in. Our bond grew stronger, not weaker. Arguments didn't feel like threats. Disagreements didn't feel like endings. We talked. We listened. We adjusted without sacrificing ourselves. Still, life tested us. Michael received a job offer in another city, not across the world, but far enough to disrupt the fragile sense of stability I had built. When he told me, I felt that old familiar panic rise again. Distance, uncertainty, change. All my instincts screamed to prepare for abandonment. He didn't ask me to decide immediately. He didn't assume anything. He simply shared his truth, his excitement, his fear, his hesitation. I went home that night feeling torn. Part of me wanted him to stay, to choose me over opportunity. Another part of me knew that doing so would betray everything I had learned about love and autonomy. That night, I didn't cry. I thought. I asked myself the hardest question I had ever faced. If this relationship ended tomorrow, would I still recognize myself? The answer surprised me. Yes. For the first time, yes. When we talked again, I told him I supported his decision, whatever he chose, not because I didn't care, but because I cared enough to respect both of us. I don't want love that requires sacrifice of identity from either of us, he said. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and admiration. I was hoping you'd say that, he admitted. In the end, he took the job temporarily. We agreed to try long distance, not with promises or pressure, but with honesty and trust. The months apart were not easy. There were lonely nights, missed routines, moments when doubt crept in. But there were also long conversations, shared vulnerability, deliberate effort. Love became intentional instead of assumed. And I discovered something profound. I wasn't clinging anymore. I was choosing. When Michael returned months later, standing in the same cafe where we first met, I realized how far I had come. I wasn't waiting to be saved. I was standing in my own strength, and love had met me there. When Michael came back, it didn't feel like a reunion from a movie. There was no running through crowds, no dramatic music playing in my head, just a quiet certainty settling into my chest as I watched him walk toward me in that same small cafe, the place where everything had begun. He smiled when he saw me, and I smiled back, not with relief, not with fear, but with recognition. We hugged, long and warm, and in that moment I understood something that would have terrified my younger self. I didn't need this embrace to feel whole. I wanted it. That difference changed everything. We took our time reconnecting. We talked openly about how the months apart had affected us, the doubts, the growth, the moments when it had been hard. Nothing was hidden, nothing softened to protect fragile illusions. Love no longer felt like a performance. It felt like partnership. Michael eventually decided to move back, not because I asked him to, not because he felt guilty or afraid to lose me. He came back because he wanted a life that felt rooted, and because we had built something worth returning to. The first night we spent together again, lying side by side in silence, I felt an unfamiliar calm, not the fragile calm that shatters at the first sign of conflict, but a deep one, the kind that comes from knowing yourself. I thought about the woman I had been when this story began, the woman who waited, the woman who endured, the woman who believed love had to be painful to be real. I wished I could sit beside her and tell her the truth, that loneliness is not a flaw, that being chosen starts with choosing yourself, that love doesn't arrive when you become smaller, it arrives when you become honest. Michael never tried to fix me. Instead, he witnessed me. He supported my dreams without needing to reshape them. He respected my boundaries without taking them personally. He loved me without asking me to disappear inside him. And I did the same for him. We built routines together, simple, meaningful ones. Morning coffee, evening walks, shared meals, quiet conversations that didn't need to lead anywhere else. Conflict came, as it always does, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like growth. One night, months later, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker below us, Michael turned to me and said, "I don't want a perfect life with you. I want a real one." I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. "I already have that," I said. The commitment we chose wasn't loud, it wasn't rushed, it wasn't fueled by fear of loss. It was built on trust. When he asked me to marry him, it wasn't on one knee in a crowded room. It was in our living room, on an ordinary evening after a long conversation about the future we wanted to create. I said yes without doubt, not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I knew who I was, with or without him. At 32, I didn't find love by waiting longer or trying harder. I found it by healing, by learning that my worth was never something to be proven, that betrayal was not my identity, that love, when it's real, doesn't consume you, it expands you. This is not the story of a woman saved by a man. This is the story of a woman who stopped abandoning herself and met love where she finally stood whole. And that, to me, is the happiest ending of all.